Welcome to Making Space For, the podcast where we embark on a journey to simplify, organize, and prioritize our lives. I'm your host, Paige Rabon, and each episode will explore the art of intentional living, helping you make room for what truly matters. In a world filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to find ourselves surrounded by things that don't contribute to our happiness or well-being. Making Space For is your guide to decluttering not just your physical space, but also your mind and soul. We'll dive into practical tips on downsizing, right-sizing, and the transformative power of letting go. Whether you're starting a cluttered closet, pondering legacy planning, or seeking the elusive balance between work and self-care, this podcast is your sanctuary for inspiration and actionable insights. Join us as we feature experts, share personal stories, and explore the profound impact of intentional living. Together, we'll navigate the journey towards a simpler, more fulfilling life. One where you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't. So are you ready to make space for the life you've always wanted? Let's dive in. This is Making Space For. Well, before we dive into today's episode, a quick shout out to our flagship company, A Move Handled with Care. As Denver Metro's premier senior and specialty move management expert since 2007, we've mastered the art of downsizing, right-sizing, organizing, and every step in between. From packing and moving to unpacking and staging, our experienced staff represent all stages of life, offering a compassionate touch to what matters most to you. So, if you're looking to make a seamless transition while keeping what truly matters in focus, trust A Move Handled with Care. Visit us at amovehandledwithcare.com or on Facebook or LinkedIn to discover the difference. Let's continue making space for the life you deserve. Welcome back to another episode of the Making Space For podcast. I'm your host, Paige Rabon, and today we are talking about a topic most of us want to avoid, death and dying. Our guest, Jamie Sarche, is the director of Prearranged Funeral Planning at Feldman Mortuary, and she helps people face these difficult conversations with clarity, compassion, and confidence. Jamie believes that planning ahead isn't depressing, it's actually a gift. By arranging services long before they're needed, families are able to make educated decisions without the cloud of grief and often feel a surprising sense of peace. She's also a TEDx speaker and seasoned communicator who shows how acknowledging our mortality allows us to live more fully and meaningful. Today, we make space for discussing death and dying. I know. So, well, let's just jump in then, I guess.
Great.
Jamie, just introduce yourself. I'm so glad to see you. Introduce yourself for those that don't know you, who you are, where you're from. How did you get into this crazy industry?
Yeah, thank you, Paige. I really appreciate you having me today. I'm Jamie Sarche. I am the director of pre-planning at Feldman Mortuary, which is Denver's oldest family-owned funeral home. In April of next year, I guess, it will be our 90th anniversary. So
Wow.
we have been taking care of people a long time. And I grew up in Denver and grew up with Feldman Mortuary being the funeral home that my family used.
Oh, interesting.
So Jim, who is the current owner of Feldman Mortuary, his dad buried my grandparents.
Wow, that's
So it's a
cool.
long time connection. Yeah, it is. It's really cool. And actually, Jim and I have known each other since we were children. We were in the same confirmation class at Temple Emmanuel. So we've just known each other forever, which kind of led me to this business, but not really. That was the final open door. But what I really think is the reason I do the work that I do is that I have always liked talking about hard stuff. I'm a person who pushes up against taboos. When I was in high school, I was a peer counselor. In college, I was doing all kinds of stuff to help people to take care of themselves in sort of the fraternity and sorority system where people had some kind of, there were a lot of rapes, there were like
Yeah.
challenging things. I was always the person, if somebody were worried that they were pregnant or they had a sexually transmitted infection, they would turn to me because they knew I could talk about hard stuff. I wasn't going to judge. I was going to help them figure out what to do. That's just the person I've just always been.
Did you get a degree in like something related to that or no? That just was like a
Not
gift you
really.
had. Oh, okay.
I have a communication degree. My goal was to work in television. So no, I don't think that my degree is what helped me at all. In fact, people are always sort of surprised that I'm not a social worker or a psychologist because they
Mhm.
assume that that's what I would be. No, that's just been the thing that is inside of me. And actually, when I think about this degree, I think, wow, why did I get that? Like, that didn't teach me a lot. Communication law was very hard, but the rest of it, I just thought, no, I know that.
Yeah.
So it was always just something that I liked to do. And when I was 26 years old, one of my close friends, Michelle, got diagnosed with a glioblastoma, which is a
Yeah.
deadly brain tumor.
Hmm.
And everybody in our lives, in her life, did what we do. And they said to her, "Oh, you're young, you're strong, you're going to beat this." I'm not at all sure why we talk about illness that way. Like, why do we set people up
Hmm.
to fight with their body? But she wasn't going to beat it. It's not beatable. And I didn't handle it that way. And I went to her and said, I'm not going to tell you you're going to be okay. And you don't have to tell me you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We can acknowledge that you're not going to be okay. And let's talk about all of that and talk about your fears. And at that point, when she was diagnosed, she had a 10-month-old child.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and he just got married. He's now 28. Like to just be able to sit together and just be in the truth of it versus let's pretend.
Hmm.
And nobody wanted to do that because they didn't want to make her feel worse. This is why we rescue people in that way, to say you're going to be fine. We don't want to make people feel worse, but then they're alone.
Yeah.
And and so I don't know why I could do that. I was 28 years old. I didn't have, or I guess I was 26. I was 28 when she died. I didn't have, nobody taught me to do that. I just did it. And that was very profound for me. And she died when we were 28. And then fast forward till I was 40. And then I heard that Jim, who owns Feldman's, was looking for someone to do prearranged funeral planning. And I didn't know anything about funerals. And
Who
yet
does?
it
I
was
mean,
like a
that's,
light,
yeah, like who
right?
does? That's the whole point of
Who
you on here today.
does?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Who does? Because we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I went to him and I was like, I know I'm the person for this. And he had never had anybody in this role before. I got no training, which is the best thing that ever happened to me because most people who do what I do it in a very specific way. And I have never done it that way and never will. Um, and what I thought at the time that I started is, well, how am I going to talk to people about this? Because if I talk to them about prearranged funeral planning, they're going to I think they're going to die.
Yeah.
And it was really like 2 years into the work that I realized I do think they're going to die. They are
Are
going to
going to
die.
die. Yes, we all are. Yeah,
We're
inevitable.
all going to die.
Hmm.
And let's just embrace that fact. Let's just learn to talk about it. And I am absolutely convinced that if we could learn to talk about death in a more straightforward way, if we could feel comfortable with the fact that we're all mortal, we could show up for people who are grieving a lot better. We could show up for people who are ill a lot better. We would just be better human beings if we didn't wall off this whole empathy because we have to rescue people.
Agreed. And I would also say too, like in our line of work, it's the denial, but it's also not understanding what people's, kind of non-negotiables or things that really matter to them, because then, somebody passes away and you are taking on the sole responsibility for those decisions. And I've watched people time and time again, like question themselves, is this what they would have wanted? Is this what, whatever that
Right.
may look like? We're the same way. Like when we move people who don't have decisions, they've fallen and now have to move immediately into an assisted living. And we're going into a home with a daughter and she's looking around and like, I don't know what those are. What are the non-negotiables? What are the things that really matter to you that if you move to whatever that is, next phase of something, what is
Yeah.
that? Because that way, communicating your wants and desires to your loved ones at least sets them up for success. And so I think there's so many ways that we don't talk, especially in the aging process. It's like we just turn a blind eye and we're like, oh, no, 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 it's fine. And then we get ourselves in a pickle and it becomes more of a, tragedy for those left behind. And I'm
That's
sure that's
right.
what you've
That's
seen all the
right.
time.
And I'm sure you see this in the moving scenario, but in death, what we see is that people who are in acute grief, they cannot think.
Yes.
They are not as
They're in an
smart as they
emotional
were.
state that makes them freeze, or
That's
an
right.
emotional state that makes them so overwhelmed that they shut down, or whatever it is.
That's right.
Exactly.
Or fight
Mm-hmm.
or become their 14-year-old selves. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Mom loved you best.
Mm-hmm.
We see siblings who just are fighting each other and then they never speak to each other
Yeah.
again. And the other thing that we see is that people are so overwhelmed that they think, okay, we've got mom just died. We've got a dead body. We can't leave a dead body laying around, but we can't figure out what we should do. So we're not going to do anything.
Anything.
We're just going to disappear that body. So that means we're going to have it cremated. We're just going to get rid of it. We'll never see mom again. We'll never do anything. We won't have any ceremony at all. And we believe as a society that if we do that, we can jump over grieving and just get back to our normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And that is absolutely not true.
Yep.
Absolutely not true. And it just complicates grieving and makes it so we're unable to process that death.
Yeah. Well, tell me about, like, if a perfect scenario, maybe that would be helpful to kind of like kick it off, of just a perfect scenario of how you would love for people to discuss death and dying, and how, like how that leads into funeral planning, and like what that perfect client family situation looks like. Like what would that look like for you to be, dialed in?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. Quite honestly, my perfect scenario is somebody in their early 50s who is perfectly fine as far as they know. And they're going to come and put a plan into place with me. They're going to make all their decisions. We're going to have a real conversation about what their values are.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of choices here. And the vast majority of people are saying, well, I don't need anything. I don't need a funeral. When you're dead, you're dead. Well, that might very well be true. I imagine the dead person is just fine. But the people who love that person
Yeah.
deserve to have a path paved for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they can walk on it when they cannot think.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who comes to me in their 50s is going to put together a plan, not just about disappearing the body, but about giving their loved ones some ceremony that is going to allow them to start processing the grief. We talk about a funeral as closure. That's not true. It's literally just opening the door to grieving. Grieving is hard work, and we have to open the door to allow that work to begin, or it just gets cemented in our body. So that would be my goal, is that somebody who, they've gotten through the major expenses of their life, and they are now thinking of like, what's their next chapter? And they put these funeral plans into place. They get today's prices for services that hopefully will be decades in the future, but quite honestly, we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. And they give their loved ones a turnkey plan.
So you talk
when that
about
death
everything
occurs,
from like, how they want their remains to be cared for. They talk about ceremony, as far as like, are people coming in and really just, like as far as music and scripture and ceremony, like
sometimes
that kind of thing? Or is it more just these are the steps, like kind of the big ticket items? Is that kind of what they're doing more?
it's typically the really big ticket items. What is the method of disposition going to be? Is it going to be burial? And we've been specializing in green burial for 90 years. Is it going to be fire cremation? And I really talk about the ins and outs of that. People have no idea how bad that is for the environment. They don't know how brutal it is to the body. They don't know that their bones are going to go through a pulverizer. Right. The funeral industry calls that ash. There's no such thing as ash.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about that. I talk about
It was
cremation by
interesting.
water.
I just wanted to mention that as I didn't know that. Like you spoke at an event that I went to and you were talking about how bad it is for the environment and all this and that. And I was like, I again, no one talks about that. So everyone thinks, oh, that's the easiest thing to do. Like I don't want, if you don't want to be buried, you only think of two binary options. It's either I'm cremated or I'm put in the ground. And
Right.
I know you were going to talk about hydro, cremation and
Yeah.
things like there's so
Alkaline
many options now.
hydrolysis.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's an environmentally sustainable way to be cremated. I believe it's a gentler approach. And you still get back what we would call ash. There's also natural reduction, which is body composting. There are a lot of choices. And the other thing about I don't want to be in the ground, a lot of people believe that it is bad to be in the ground. They think that there's a problem. There's not a problem. In the United States, there is space for burial for 10,000 years. And
Wow.
if you're buried in a green way, which means no embalming, a biodegradable casket, if there is a casket, everything feeds the earth. That's what we're meant to do. That is the circle of life.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that grows comes from something that is dead. So feeding the earth by burying ourselves or our people, it's a good thing, but we don't know that. So I talk about all of those things. And I want people to pick something that matches their values. So we're going to talk about, yes, those big ticket items. Some people are going to say, I want this song, I want this reading. I always ask, where should it be? What about the clergy person? Is there going to be a newspaper notice, a limousine for your family, things like that? It really just depends how far somebody wants to go. I have one client who's a surgeon, and I imagine that his life is pretty, detailed. This is
Mm-hmm.
what we do, 1, 2, 3. He's given me literally a script. He's told me where to get the orchids that he wants, and he
Wow.
wants these two-pronged orchids, and there's on the file, bring scissors because one part of the orchid goes in the grave, the other part goes home with the family who put it in the grave. Like that is very
Wow.
detailed.
Mm-hmm.
That's not typical,
Okay.
but we do as much as you want to do. And then the other thing that's so great, when the death occurs, I will know where that is.
Mm.
Often people will say to their loved ones, oh, I want this song. And then at the time of a death, the people forgot.
Yeah.
They don't remember. They don't remember where they put it. And then 3 weeks after the burial or whatever kind of ceremony there is, they are upset because they didn't do what their person wanted them to do.
Yeah.
So I take as much information as somebody wants to give me, but often it's really the big ticket items. And then maybe over the years, they add things.
So as you're thinking, and I know, like I'm trying to, I always think as like devil's advocate of like why people don't want to do this, right? One of the other things I thought of is like, well, I don't know where I'm going to live, and I don't know where I'm going to
Yeah.
die. So what
Yeah.
happens when I live in Colorado? I make my plans when I'm in my 50s, but then I move to Arizona to snowbird, and I end up staying there. How does that work?
Such a good question, Paige. I'm so glad you bring that up because sometimes I forget about that. So the money, funeral homes are not allowed to accept money for services they're not providing today. So the vast majority of funeral homes will put that money into an insurance policy that is owned by the person who's making the plan. They are
Okay.
the insured. The funeral home is likely going to be the assignee, but that can change. And um, because it's a life insurance policy, it can be used anywhere. So any funeral home would just submit the death certificate to the company and get paid. One thing to be very careful about, though, is you want to make sure that the funeral home that you choose, if you're in Colorado, you want to choose a funeral home that will allow you to keep all the interest also if you move away. So,
Okay.
like at Feldman Mortuary, we do not get paid unless we actually do the service. If you move, every dollar you've paid in and all of the growth goes with you wherever you go.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, when you say that you pay into that, so you help them set that whole process up. It's not something they
I
have to
do.
go find themselves. Okay. Okay.
No, that's how I get paid. Actually, I'm not staff at the funeral home. I'm actually an insurance agent. That's how I
Got
get
it.
paid.
And then
Yeah,
so if you made all these plans and lovely arrangements and another funeral home calls you, you will share this is how they wanted it done, this is what they wanted, that sort of thing. So
that's right.
perfect.
And
Okay.
like, let's say somebody does what you suggested, where they move, they call me and they say, "Hey, we've moved to Arizona. This is the funeral home we're going to actually use." And then I send it to them right now.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So the other thing is like, we were talking about this maybe pre-show of, I'm putting this in the lens of as we grow older, but I mean, the thing about funeral homes is that's not who you deal with. You deal with, I'm sure, from birth to death,
Everybody.
just everything of wherever you are in the spectrum of age. And so is
Yeah.
this something that people do for like, I don't know, I was just thinking about like you set up a college fund for your kiddo and like things like that. Like, is this something that
Interesting.
like people do as like a preemptive thing? Like you just set this up for your child? Are you seeing that? Or is this more like
I
you
am
as a
not
grown
seeing
adult
that.
take this on?
I am not seeing that. And I don't know that I would recommend doing it for a child unless you had some reason to believe you were going to need it. One of the reasons I feel like I wouldn't recommend doing it for a child is that one of the real benefits of doing it with their funeral home you're going to do it with
Hmm.
is that it locks in today's charges.
Sure.
And for a child, I don't know that we would feel that comfortable with knowing, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, okay, they might move. For a child, they probably will move. And so I guess I wouldn't want to do it for that reason. And then like even for my own children, so I did my funeral plans when I was 42. I'm 56 now. My husband has his funeral plans. I have actually considered doing the plans for my children. They're adults. They're 30 and 27. I haven't actually put funeral plans into place for them, but I have bought cemetery property for all of us and a spouse for each of my
Well, and
children.
then too, I think it was you who told a story, or maybe someone else, but somebody told a story about a gal who bought, planned her whole funeral, did the whole thing. She passes away. Her kids had no idea. And they were so thrilled because she had planned everything and had locked in and paid for everything. And the family was like, what a relief. And so, and I think she had done it for like 20, 30 some years. And so the
Yeah.
pricing that she got for it was like pennies on the dollar for what she was going
Yes,
to have to do. And so the family was like, you mean to tell me we buried mom for X amount of dollars? And like today it would have
yeah,
cost at least two, if not three times more. And so that's what makes me
much
think
more than
about
that.
that is it something to do when you're young? I mean, and you're in the industry, so you're going to
Young-ish.
plan. I was gonna say you're going to plan your funeral at 42 because you're in the industry and you know the benefits of that. I mean, I talked
That's
to my
right.
my daughter just started high school this year, and I told my husband, I'm like, well, we have 6 years because then my youngest will be 2 years after her. I was like, well, we have 6 years before we have to downsize, and he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm not having this big old house and a yard and all the maintenance with no kids at home. I'm not doing it. And he's like, it's just because this is what you do every day. And I'm like, yes, it is. I was like, we can have a guest room. I'm like, these kids aren't coming home. So it's the same kind of idea of like, when you're doing things in the head and the amount of money that you're saving, I don't think people
Yes,
understand what that looks like.
that's right. Funerals double in cost every 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
So I did my funeral at 42. I believe I'm getting buried in a greenway. That's important to me. I believe I'm going to just say I paid $8,000. I think that's right. I did the math at that time. If I live, like a natural life, I could very well live into my 90s. Maybe I miss 5 doublings
Yeah.
of that. I mean, that is a lot of math. That
Hmm.
was over 100 grand that it would cost if I lived to have normal lifespan
That's crazy.
span. And then the other thing that when you do it, young, because it's held by a life insurance policy, you could decide to pay for it over a long time frame. And you pay more for it in that way because you're paying premiums. But if God forbid you get hit by a bus, it's paid for. So like in my case, I paid for it over 5 years.
Hmm.
My husband, when we did his, we had 2 kids in college. And so we decided to do it over 10 years. So we're still paying on his. Quite honestly, we could pay it off, but it's like a low
Yeah.
monthly payment. I don't even care.
Yeah. It's the incremental things that you do to set yourself up for success. I think a lot of times people wait so long that then it feels monumental versus
That's
taking the
right.
little steps that you do today that set you up for success.
And the other thing was saying it feels monumental. The other reason that I think it's so good to do it in your 50s when you're fine is that it feels theoretical.
Yeah.
It feels monumental when your person is going to die soon
Yes.
or they just died.
Right.
When you get a diagnosis, when you're coming because you're very old, like it just feels a lot more real. Doing it now, like it just is like, oh yeah, someday that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not this emotionally charged thing.
It's almost
The
like
other
we're
thing,
preparing for retirement, right? Like
that's right.
it's it's not happening today. Gosh, I wish.
Yeah.
But it's not happening today. But like what do you do? And like you do have to sacrifice a little bit of your money today to set you up for success for later. And so it's that same thing. I don't have to put a whole chunk of money aside if I, diversify this. I mean, you can go into all the different ways of finances, but it's the same kind of thing. You do have to sacrifice today to kind of build that wealth so that you can retire.
Well, and think of the other things that you do to protect your family. You have life insurance. You want to protect your family with a life insurance policy. And a lot of people will say, well, I want my life insurance will just pay for my funeral. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, I've just shared with you how expensive it might be. Do you really want that huge chunk of money to go to your funeral when you could do a really small chunk of money now and pay for that
Yep.
over time? The other thing that you put into place is homeowners insurance. You hope you never need it, but it's important to have for protection. Car insurance, you hope you don't need it, but you have to have it for protection. This is something you absolutely know you're going to need.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to bring up too is if you travel at all, having a travel plan to bring your body back
Yeah.
is really, really important. And most people say, well, when I go on an international trip, I get traveler's insurance. Okay, great. That is important. But that is just going to be a reimbursement. So your family is going to have to figure out how to deal with the embassy, how to speak the language in a different country, how to find a funeral home. That's crazy. If you get a travel plan, that's another thing that I can offer to you. That is all the logistics in
Hmm.
addition to the payment.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
Gosh.
so that, even if you're not doing funeral plans, it's a good idea to have that.
What are some of your ideas, tips, and tricks to like have this conversation with, let's just say we are talking about the aging population, as an adult child, how do you encourage, some of those adult children to start having those conversations with their parents?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to point out that there are some people who will never do this.
Yep.
They will never have this conversation. My father is one of those people. He's an estate planning attorney. He literally is sure that if he puts a plan into place, he'll die. And I'm here to tell you, he's going to die anyway.
Yep.
So the question becomes, which way do you want to do it? So just know that some people are never going to, and like I've chosen not to continue to have the argument because it's not valuable. Um, but what I would say is, hey, I was listening to this podcast. Have you ever considered this? I'm considering it. Can we
Mm,
talk about it? So literally, it is not just about the aging parent. Let's all do this.
yeah.
Let's all do this. It's just really, really important. And it's funny how this goes because sometimes kids are so scared to bring it up to their parents, and parents are so scared to bring it up to their kids that nobody has the conversation. But if somebody's brave enough, often both of them will go, oh, thank God, I really wanted to talk about that with you. And I do find it from the other end too, where the adult parent, the aging parent brings it to their kid. And the kid is like, no, no, we're not going to talk about that. I'll take care of it. You don't have to think
Yeah.
about this. I think that's a mistake too. And so I often will say to my clients when they'll say, well, I got to discuss it with my kids to see what they want. Well, quite honestly, your kid doesn't know.
Hmm.
They don't want to think about your death, and they really only want what you want.
Yeah.
So just put the plan into place and tell them you did it.
And we always say too, set yourself a deadline or a timeline to do it. Like for us to downsize, like if everyone's coming to your house for Thanksgiving this year, it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to go through all the mementos and all the things, and everyone's picking it up at Thanksgiving. And if you don't want it, then I'm getting rid of it. Kind of the same thing I would have said, like set a goal. Like I want to get this done in 2025. So by 2025, if you don't want to engage in the conversation, fine, but I'm going to move on so that you're giving people like, because if you leave it in this abyss, it just never gets done, I'm sure.
That's right. That's right. And so many people will say to me, well, I'm going to have the conversation with my kids and then I'll be back in
Yeah.
touch.
Oh, yeah. Let me get back with
Years
you.
and years and years
Mm-hmm.
and years because they don't want to have the
Yep.
conversation. It's too
Exactly.
scary.
Yeah. So you made the news the other day. We were talking about that. Just kind of briefly, what are the things that people should be looking for, like when they're finding a funeral home?
Yeah.
When they're looking for that, what are the things like top three? What are the three things that you think are just like the questions people should be asking?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in a family owned funeral home that has been around for a long time. I want you to look at the reviews. We have a 4.8 on Google. I'm very, very proud of that. So look at the reviews, find out where they care for the bodies. A lot of funeral homes use a centralized care center where they're stacking bodies on shelves.
Mm,
I'm not a big believer in that. So maybe check in, where
okay.
are the bodies cared for? And can I go to that place? I want
Mm,
to walk into that place. I would invite you in anytime. I mean, that day that I was on the news, Marshall Zellinger, the reporter, called me because there was this horror story in Pueblo. And I said, come on over. And he just did that day. Like we're really happy. You could come knock on our door. We will bring you into the care center today.
yeah,
So
that's
I
great.
really want that. That kind of transparency, I think, is incredibly important.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
then
the go ahead. Yeah,
you
you
want
have
to
one more?
have one that people have used, that
Hmm.
you've had experiences with, or your friends have had experiences with. Ask around. And that's again why it's so important to do this ahead of time, to make these plans ahead of time. When somebody dies and there are no plans, it's a phone call. People are calling, they're Googling what's a
Yeah,
funeral home near me. They can't figure this out.
right. Yeah, and then it becomes more just like what's convenient, maybe not the best
That's right.
choice. It's like what's convenient and
That's
who
right.
will take it, last minute,
Yes.
that sort of thing versus planning it out just a smidge. Well, the
Yes.
last question I have for you is and we were talking about the whole purpose of our podcast is to give people information so makes them feel empowered to make good decisions. So, what is pre-planning your funeral? In your opinion, what does that free up? What does that make space for in your life to do something else?
Mm, mm. Such a good question. I am convinced that the vast majority of us have this sort of worry about what's going to happen at our death in our head. We think about it regularly. And I am convinced that as we age, we think about it more. So get this done, then you don't have to think about it again. It's done. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen to you. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen to your loved ones when that happens. I mean, so many of us want to take care of our people. We want to hold their hand. We want to walk them through the hard things in life. Planning ahead is a way we can do that
Yeah.
when we're not physically present.
I love that. Yeah, it is. It's like, the thought of like letting that go and know that it's been taken care of. And then I also would say like communicate it with your family too.
Yes.
Tell them
Yes.
what your wishes are, even if you don't have the money or the space or the whatever, still have the conversation so people know, like communicate that. Because
Yeah.
I would venture to say there are a lot of people that, there's a million ways and reasons why they can't. But there are things that they can do, I'm sure, to kind of get ahead of it. And one of them is just having the conversation.
Well, and one thing that you just said really struck me, like maybe you don't have the money. Here's the deal. Doing it now, first of all, is much less money, but also if you don't do it, your loved ones are going to have to pay for it before anything gets done. So paying for it now, and you can pay for it if you need to, you could spread it out over 3, 5, 10 years. Sometimes for people who really need a very low monthly payment, I would split it into chunks and say, okay, we're going to do this chunk for 3 years, and then we're going to come back and do this chunk for 3 years, and then this chunk for 3 years. So not having enough money for it is really a good reason to do it now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, now everyone's going to make a plan, and everyone's Thanksgivings are going to involve talking about funeral planning.
Yes, I hope so.
I do too. I hope that everyone's talking about all the things that matter to them. What are the non-negotiables, and how do we navigate this as a family to make it better? And if you don't
Yes.
have those people, maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's your confidant, maybe it's your power of attorney, talking about it
Yes.
with your guardianship, with whoever that is, whoever is managing that for you, just having the conversation.
One thing I'm so proud about, and I feel like this is because of my intention of making it safe to talk about. When I first started doing these arrangements, I would ask, why are you coming to talk to me now? And the vast majority of people would say, well, I'm old, I just got this diagnosis, something like that. Now, what they say to me is, well, we were talking about it at my book club.
Oh, I love that.
All of my friends have met with you. Like it really is changing. I can see that people are getting less afraid of having the conversation. And I feel so empowered by that and proud of that.
Great. I love it. Okay. Well, we're going to be intentional with our conversations. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks, Paige. It's great to see you.
You too. That wraps up another inspiring episode of the Making Space for podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guests and to you, our cherished listeners. Your journey to intentional living begins with each small step, and we're honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider liking, subscribing, and rating our podcast on your favorite platform. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder, if you're embarking on a move or seeking expert guidance in downsizing, remember A Move Handled with Care in Denver. With over 15 years of experience in senior and specialty move management, we're here to transform your transition into a seamless, stress-free experience. Visit amovehandledwithcare.com for more information, and let's continue making space for the life you've always wanted. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep making space for what matters most.